Good afternoon, folks.
Hello,
Afternoon.
Tracy.
Hello.
Afternoon.
Janice, I don't see Delia. Am I?
I don't see him either, though. I always allow for the fact that there's like a 50-50 chance you have to restart your computer to get things to work nowadays.
Yep. Or you're not allowed to register as host, so you have to, there's a way to get around it, which you just put a different email address in, but it took me a long time to figure that out.
There's a participant named Faculty Senate.
That's our administrator,
Ah, okay.
Janine.
Janine. But good catch. Thank you, Adam. I thought we had someone here by phone, but I don't, oh, maybe it's on the next page. And let's just wait one more minute for Dale, else Janice, I'll just be Dale for a bit. Is that what you think would be best?
For a quorum, you know.
Janine, what does it take for a quorum? Or actually, John is going to know that answer. John Stellani.
Oh, I'm sorry. What, Gracie?
The question was, what does it take for a quorum?
Well, 50% plus one.
But
So
there's a lot of inactives in the summer that we don't count.
Yeah, we don't count them. Yeah, if they've registered that they're not coming. So I don't think we have a problem with a quorum for today.
Let's see. So we 54, but how many? Some of those I'm seeing are not Senate members that I know of, but I guess we'd have to be sure. Let's see, one. Trying to just count people I don't recognize as Senate members. There's a couple. Let's see, 1, 2.
And we're at 57 now.
3. Yeah.
especially with the reduced number over the summer.
Yeah,
Also, we just really we'll need to worry about that if we take a vote.
Right. And there's a lot of stuff going on without a vote. Yeah, Robert, thank you. I think we have 4 guests and we're at 57, so we're good in
Okay.
either case, and especially because we have a bunch of people who are have said that they're not here for the summer, and those don't count against our absences.
yeah, that's right. So I mean, I guess as long as I'm only counting like 3 or 4 visitors and we're up to 58, so I think we should be fine.
All right, Janice, should I be Dale for a little bit?
Yeah, I think probably it's good for you to go ahead and get started. I'll try to keep an eye on the raised hands and the chat.
Great. Well, all right. Well, welcome to the second meeting of the 40th session of the Faculty Senate of Texas A&M University. If you need a reminder of the Zoom features used in our Senate meetings, the Zoom tip sheet can be found on our website at the top of the current agenda page. At this time, please make sure your microphone is muted. Either I or Janice will be Secretary Epstein will be monitoring the raised hands functions. We will verbally identify you, then you can unmute your mic and ask your question. In fairness to others, please limit yourself to 1 question at a time. Depending on if the speaker gets here, either Speaker-elect Hammond or Secretary Epstein will be monitoring the chat to convey messages as necessary. So please send any chat questions directly to that person. We are using the registration function of Zoom to track attendance. Most visitors today have been asked to view the meeting via our live stream, but our guests and administrators who may be asked to answer questions are joining via Zoom. Visitors wishing to address Visitors wishing to address the Senate may make this request by sending a chat message to Speaker-elect Hammond or Secretary Epstein, or by using the raised hands function. Finally, if a senator wishes to offer a motion during today's meeting, please raise your hand during new business and ask to be recognized. Today, the Senate is being double teamed in our guest speaker position. Greg Hartman, Senior Vice President and Chief Operations Officer for the university, and Damon Sladen, Vice President for Human Resources and Organizational Effectiveness, are with us today to present an update and answer questions on the path forward with its considerable staff realignment and other issues such as benefits. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tracy. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I see Dale just popped up too. So Dale, thank you. Thank you for inviting us back. We appreciate it. And actually, the way we're going to do this, if it's okay, is Alan Sams and I are going to do a presentation first. And I'll need to share the screen. I'll show that. And then it's a presentation that Alan and I and several of the VPs and operations have been working on to help kind of do a little bit of an update on what's going on with Path Forward and where we're at. After Alan and I go through the presentation and walk through it and answer any questions or comments you may have, then Damon is going to talk and dive more specifically and deeper into HR issues, which I know a lot of folks have a lot of questions about. So one thing before I get into the presentation that I'd like to say, if we could, one, again, thanks for inviting us back. We'll come back as often as y'all invite us and want us to come back and keep talking about this. So we appreciate this. This is a presentation that we've been working on for a while to try to figure out how to begin going out across the campus community starting this month. But I suspect it'll be much more intensely starting August and obviously September when more folks are on campus, just to talk about where we're at with things, sort of what's an update, what are some of the changes that are happening, what's the impact going to be, what are the expected benefits of some of the changes, with a major focus. This is mostly focused on the operational issues, things like HR, IT, facilities, finance, and Marcom. And so that's the context of this presentation. This is the first group we've shown this presentation to, and so partly it's to give you some update, although some of this is going to be information you've heard before probably in previous conversations that I've had or others may have had with you. But part of it is to give you all an update, but also as a first audience, we'd love to hear your input on, is this a good presentation or not as we start to go across the campus. One of the challenges with this is that there's 2 ways to go with this. You can either give a high level overview, and some people are going to think that's great, more than enough information, or you can go really in depth. And some people obviously are not going to want to go into that level of detail when you're talking about some really complex areas like IT, finance, HR, those kind of things. We've tried to sort of find the sweet spot here. And actually the slides that Alan and I are going to show you are actually just a small subset of a much larger master deck we've created. That master deck is 97 slides, and I guarantee you we're not going to show you all those today. We have a much smaller version, but the idea is we have done different versions of some of the slides that are sort of high level, and then getting into the nitty gritty for other areas. And the idea is that myself, Alan, Damon Sladen, John Crawford, the CFO, whoever it might be, as we start going out to different groups around the campus, we can mix and match the slides based on the expectations of the audience we're going to be talking to. We either do high level, or we can do really in depth, or we can do high level on most issues, but maybe have a few slides that go deeper into IT, for example, or whatever. So that's kind of the idea here. So we're testing this out on you guys first. Sorry, you're guinea pig, but I think if there's an audience that's going to be honest with us about what you think, it's going to probably be the faculty Senate audience. We thought this was a good group to start with. So we look forward to your comments. We look forward to what you have to say. Give us input that'll make us better, and I'll dive right in. Okay, everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. So again, just a few things in some of these early slides. I'm going to do some of these early slides. Alan's going to get into some of the operational functions, and then we'll kind of wrap up together. And then, like I said, Damon's going to dive much deeper into HR after we finish this. But just some of the, again, this is for the broad section of audiences we'll be talking to with this. So the idea behind Path Forward, which is what Dr. Banks talked to me about when she actually first talked to me about coming to work over here in this position, was she really wanted to do a really ambitious kind of administrative reorganization so that we could really look at the way operations are handled here at the university to make so that we can make good decisions on how to deal with competing priorities and also make sure that we're running as smoothly as possible and dealt with some of the bureaucratic issues that were going on. Our idea is to improve operations so that the operations piece itself is much more smooth, much less bureaucratic, so that the kind of work that really matters that we're doing, the research, the academics, whatever it may be, is much more efficient and effective. Our goal, whenever we can accomplish this, is to try to reduce those complicated bureaucratic processes we've had in the past. And I know, when I had my role at the Health Science Center before I came over to this role, there was often many times I was dealing with issues where I was having to get multiple sign-offs on different things that I want to do, or it was hard to sometimes find who was accountable for an issue or a problem we had or whatever. Our goal is to fix that. We're not there yet. We have a lot of work to do to continue to fix those kind of things, but that's what this is, because the better we can create a strong operational backbone, the better it should be for those of you, like all of you, who are doing the academic and the research work, which is what we're all about. That was the purpose of all this, and that's why we've gone through this difficult process here at times. For one, we're trying to streamline, and by streamline, I mean, we haven't been doing big RIFs, reductions in force or anything, and that hasn't been necessary. That really wasn't the issue, but how do we avoid duplication and lack of accountability for the processes that we have to get things done? That allows us to think, or that part of it is because we also want to expand the kind of things that we're offering. For example, performance and visualization in fine arts and those kind of things. How do we build a university that can begin to expand what the university provides to the state, to the country, to the world? And again, back to that sort of overall concept, how do we have an organization and a culture and environment where we can thrive and we're not being dealt with bureaucratic hassles that end up slowing things down, cost a lot of money, both for the university and frankly the state and taxpayers. How do we build an organization that's much more nimble, holds itself accountable, and can do a better job of providing the structure we need to accomplish what it is we're all about? So things you should expect and things you should hold the operational entities accountable for as we move forward in this process. One is we've got to do a process of continuous improvement. I know a lot of you know what that is. You probably do it in your own structure sometimes, but that means you're never sort of settled that we're as good as we can be. Things change, situations change, the context of the state, our budget, all those kind of things change. We always need to be seeing, can we be doing things more productively? Again, with the goal of being less hassle, greater accountability for the services we have to provide to make this a great university. That means reducing administrative burdens for all of you. And again, that whole concept of repetitions to get permission, or a process that takes too long or whatever. How do we make that work as well as possible for everyone in this organization? Accountability. Too often, again, my experience was for a while, and I'm sure many of you have seen this too, is when something wasn't done correctly, you didn't always know who was responsible for that, or how do we make sure that that's not going to happen again? How do we fix that? And who do we hold accountable when things weren't working well, when things got held up or whatever? And I think this is one of the biggest issues we really need to work on. And this also gets into things like performance metrics for operations and all those kind of things we have to talk about. That also leads to really clear roles and responsibilities. Each of you as a leader on this university should be really clear, who is it that makes HR decisions that affect me? Who is it that makes finance decisions? Who is it that makes buildings decisions about buildings and facilities? Those should be clear, and we should know who's responsible for those things. If we're not doing that well, that's something we have to fix. And then another important thing for all of our workers across the organization is making sure that there's career paths for people. In many of the way things got structured, where there's duplicative structures or other things, a lot of employees had to basically leave the path they were on if they're ever going to advance in the organization. And there wasn't a real clear way to grow up the organization, to go up a career ladder. If you were ambitious and you wanted to grow and continue to do bigger and more important things, it was difficult to know how that would work. And there were often dead-end career paths we had. Here, Damon's probably going to talk about some more of this in some of the ways that HR is thinking about restructuring some things. But one of the big goals we had is how do we make sure that all employees have a career path, that if they work hard, if they want to continue to grow responsibility and those kind of things, there was a way to do that. And they didn't have to leave certain parts of the organization in order to continue to grow their career. Make this effective, we've got to have better collaboration. We've got to be accountable. We have to be efficient. We talked about those things. I think this is the most important slide here. We have to commit as the operational organization that helps this university run. We have to be transparent, which is why we're going to be much better about showing up at any group that wants us to come speak. We're going to start doing that consistently. You guys are the start of this, but I've got some folks working with me who are basically out there surveying staff councils, staff groups, different colleges, all the different groups across campus to say, if you have a meeting, you want someone, whether it's me or Alan or Tim Scott or NK or John Crawford, Damon, whoever it is, if you want someone to come speak, we're going to get someone there to come speak to your group. And again, go into the level of detail that makes most sense for the audience that you're asking for. So we're really going to try to be transparent. We're going to try to make things simpler. That's not always easy to do because this is a complex organization, but we've been working very hard to try to simplify some of the things we're going to do, and so that this organization is easier to understand. It doesn't have to be that complicated to understand the way things should work around here. We're going to hold ourselves accountable. We'll talk about this later too, but at a minimum, in a year from now, we're going to go back and do an analysis of how well we've done implementing pieces of Path Forward. What has gone well? What didn't go well? Where do we still have challenges? Where do we need to maybe change things that didn't work well in order to make them work better? That's a 1 year kind of accountability goal we're going to have, but we have to hold ourselves accountable all the time, all of you. And some of that goes back to transparency. And then the other thing too, you'll see, and particularly as we dive into some of these other areas, collaboration is really critical. All this, some of you have heard the discussions we've had about solid line versus dotted line, matrix organization, which is not an unusual structure in a lot of large, complex organizations. But those things require to be successful an enormous amount of collaboration. There's parts of the university and parts of operations that do a good job of collaborating, but that's not a uniform across the board. We have to really hold ourselves accountable to being good collaborators, to working with folks, talking to people, and working our way through problems and challenges and making sure we're not doing stupid things that just don't make sense. Or if we just work together and sort of figured out what was the best solution to get us to the right place, we do a much better job. So collaboration in all this becomes critical. And again, in all four of these, the one theme of all this that's not written there, but is critical, is communications. we've got to communicate a lot, and we've got to be much better about over communicating the whole time as well too. I'm going to cut to Alan now. Alan's going to walk through some of the specific pieces of the operational divisions. Again, still very high level, but we can go as deep as you want with the questions, and do know that Damon will go deep into HR when we get to that point. If there's any questions, obviously, let me know, but otherwise, I'm going to turn this over to Alan to start talking. Alan?
Yeah, hey, Greg, thank you. And just at the outset, I'll disclose I'm actually at home. I was tested positive for COVID this weekend, so I'm doing a bit of work from home. So my voice sounds a little odd, and if it does go out, then Greg is going to take over. But this is an important time for Greg and myself to have with you. So we're trying to go through this. So. Like Greg said, these 5 what we call service function areas that are really, I will say, the backbone or the foundation of everything that we do, the success of the faculty and the staff and the students on campus and us as an institution. It's really important that they function well, function efficiently, and function together. And are coordinated between what they do. So when we make major changes in them, each individually, we need to make sure that that is coordinated across them, both in what's going on, what those changes are, but also the timing, the scheduling of those changes. And that was really the genesis of this whole exercise that we're reporting to you about today, is how we have all 5 of these groups, all 5 of these BPs working together to try to harmonize what's going on over the course of the summer and in the ensuing year or so as all this gets implemented. So, Greg, next slide, I guess. The first one's going to be human resources. So the way this is going to be set up is that what most people are interested in is what are the actions that are going to be taken, what's happening, and then what are the impacts on me, or what are the impacts of those changes. And so you'll see that that's the way these slides are kind of set up. But so the first action is centralizing all the people. That's the thing that most people are talking about, is realigning the personnel. Now, that doesn't always mean, in fact, it usually doesn't mean that they're actually changing anything about their job location or whatever, but that we're centralizing the way they report in the organization and how they're overseen, without actually removing them from the unit that they're currently working in. And so that's kind of the root of all 5 of these changes. Is that as we centralize them, or another word for that is unifying them under one organization, we can bring a lot more consistency to what they're doing and how they're doing it, which allows us to do a lot of other beneficial things, which are the subsequent actions. You can see multiple hires from one posting. We call those evergreen postings, where we no longer have to have one advertisement or one position, one announcement for every position. We can operate much more off templates, and I know that there is some of that's done already, but doing that in a much more systematic way. Centralizing, standardizing, onboarding, so it's much less of a one-off kind of arrangement, and can cluster those more so that they're more effective and more efficient. And then really developing a system for employee development that's much more than just unit by unit, and title by title, that there can be a more systematic approach to that, is the 4th item that HR is doing. Greg, next slide. And so the outcomes of the impact of this, as you can see there, is that most of this is all around providing a more improved employee experience, whether that be during the hiring process or during their professional development, during their time in their position, whether it's their onboarding or their hiring, or actually going in after they're here so that they can have progressive advancement in their position. Greg, next slide. And then the third slide for each of these 5 areas is really focused on the timing the timing of this as it transitions to the next year. As you can see, the period between now and September 1 is largely around getting the organization structure finalized and getting the people in the right slots, so to speak. Then the period of the next month the next 4 months till the end of the calendar year is more around growing the organization to the right size to service the needs of an institution our size. And then third is, the first half of next calendar year is really about deploying that professional development system to help the employees that we've got. The next slide, Greg. So IT is the next service function area. Again, you could probably call an action 0 here is the centralization that allows all these actions to take place. But the people being unified, the realignment of the personnel would be the first thing that happens, and then these other 4 actions. Having a greatly simplified help desk system, and I'll mention a little bit more of this in a bit, but having a streamlined IT purchasing, having an IT store, so to speak, where we can have inventory available that can be purchased on demand rather than ordering it, and actually get some economies of scale and pricing and things like that. So there's some cost savings as well. Improving our endpoint management platform, which is where you go or how you get service on your computer when you've got a problem, whether it be in your office or lab or other location. And then finally, to replace the 50-some networks that we currently have on the campus with a modern unified system that will allow us to be much more secure and be much more flexible and mobile as we move around campus doing things, and connecting in here or there or whatever, creating the new network for campus, like I said, to replace the 50 or so that we currently have operating on campus. Greg, next slide, please.
And if I could, real quick on that Aggie network, just so everyone knows that's a commitment. There's already been $50 million approved towards the development of that new Aggie network. It's going to be an expensive undertaking, and IT and folks, we'll have more information as we go down this path. Right now, we're still in the planning phase, but that's a commitment that there's dollars attached to it already. So that's going to be very significant. It'll improve security, accessibility, speed, access to the cloud, all those kind of things too. So we can get into more detail about that at a future meeting.
And so the outcomes, as you can imagine from this, faster response, clearer indications about who to call for what, and like Greg was just referring to, the new network is going to be a great addition. Next slide, Greg. So, yeah, so again, the timeline for this, and this is going to be consistent across most of the next couple months between now and the start of the fiscal year, are going to be focused on getting people aligned in the organization, getting the structure for that organization created and operational, getting the culture established. Like Greg just mentioned, we're already in phase 1 development for the next gen Aggie network. So then the next 4 months until the end of the calendar year, the network development continues. Get the IT store established and set up. Restructure the service desk system to what it needs to be, and then begin developing that endpoint process. So that won't actually be rolled out until the first few months of next calendar year. But you can see there that that's really when they start deploying some of the phase 2 implementation part for the new network. the IT store will become operational, and the new desk help desk structure will also become operational. So that kind of gives you a timeline of when these different things are going to happen. The third of the 5 areas, Marcom, action 0 probably would be centralization of the positions in terms of their oversight. The idea here is to not take over the marketing communications efforts from all the components of the university, but more to serve as a strategic supportive partner to them, to provide an environment in which these individuals who are frequently they're one of a kind in the unit they belong to, or feel somewhat isolated, to provide them an environment around them that they can get professional development and support in their professional advancement, to provide the kind of editorial, I won't call it oversight, but process support and assistance with some of the media interactions. And then finally, the website consistency and support. As most of you probably are aware, as you look across campus, there's a lot of different variations on web design and function, and so there's an effort to make that a bit more consistent, but also provide the support needed to do that, both technical and design. So, Greg, next slide. You can see this, much of this brand is going to be a recurring theme in this as we try to, we have a strong brand, but to improve the uniformity across our representation of that in all the various units, both academic and non-academic units. As I mentioned before, the professional development and having more of a unified presence, and that's all these various outcomes come from this, having a unified organization that does this across all of the units. Next slide, Greg. I can make it through this, I know. So the implementation of this, like the others, the first few months are getting this all stood up, but I want to draw your attention. Well, and then the second few months is rolling out these various. Well, I guess in Marcom, the next few months till the end of the calendar year is all around getting the, I will say, the operational organization and structure and policies and procedures and terminology all unified, because there's a lot of variation of that across campus. And so the next few months, the first few months of the next fiscal year is going to be devoted to really fleshing that out so that everybody's on the same page, so to speak. And then the first few months of next calendar year is beginning to implement some of that. What I wanted to bring out though on this is that you'll notice that between now and September 1, reviving brand council. At the end of the September to December box there is launch brand hub. That's going to be the support network. The brand council is the internal kind of oversight group. The brand hub is the support, the resource outlet for all the unit personnel to get their help from. And then in that third box is to create an advisory, a Marcom advisory board. All this is designed to provide both internal and external development of that brand consistency and brand strength that I talked about before. So, Greg, next slide. Facilities. Again, centralization and unification of the personnel allows us to do these various things. So have a single point person for each facility, have a clearer maintenance request process that allows faster response times. Have a new campus planning, design, and construction system, which will allow the sunsetting of the CBE, Council for Built Environment process. And then finally, development of our own analytics and mapping so that we can evaluate system utilization. and all the things that depend on that, whether it be, utilization or space, that we're leasing it to organizations or cohabitating with organizations, and some of the financial and other interactions that go along with those. The outcomes are like you would think, speed and quality of service in terms of repairs and you can see in the first line there the emergency coordination, but really just better service and the space data and mapping service is not a function that we currently have very good data on, and so we anticipate that this can be greatly improved by implementing some of the systems that are going in. Greg, next slide. And so again, there's a lot of acronyms on this. I'm not going to go through all of them. It really follows the other pattern in that a lot of time and effort being spent between now and the end of the fiscal year to get people in the right seats in the right places and begin getting some of these systems developed. The systems become fully developed in the next few months after that, between then and December. And then the first couple months of next calendar year is when much of the deployment happens of those. And then last is finance. So as all the others, we're gonna, the first action is centralizing the personnel, and that's underway already, as it is with the other areas. So a couple of other action items are that to assess the way we the processes for purchasing, and to make those more streamlined than they currently are and bring some consistency, as Greg said early on in some of his early slides. And then finally, one of the big ones is to review contract workflow. That seems to be a very large bottleneck and something that we need to bring some clarity and uniformity to. Next slide, Greg. So again, an improved toolkit for finance staff. All this is gets back to that consistency, because there's a lot of variation across campus and how these various procedures are done. And the more we can bring a continuous improvement, another thing Greg talked about early on, to contract flow, to purchasing, to a lot of different aspects of finance, is a big piece of what they're planning to do. Greg, last slide for finance. Again, like the others, the next couple months is about getting the personnel organized correctly, beginning the continuous improvement process. There's a plan that the working group has developed for how to do that. It's actually beginning to function already, but getting that in place, then the next, I guess this slide is done a little bit different just to bring your attention to that. This is really through December and then into the next couple of years and then through the next summer. But it's the same general function or the same general structure, in that the first box there is more about getting things organized. The next box is getting the process and procedures worked out on how we're going to do that, analyze what our system is and how we can improve it, that continuous improvement concept. And then next summer, more about actually refining these things as we approach the end of the fiscal year. That's why this group is a little bit different. So next slide, Greg, and you might want to take over.
Yeah, I'll take, so you can get a drink, Alan, and catch your breath too. So just as we said, this was about organization, operational things. We didn't want to not mention, we know there's a lot of other big issues: the creation of development arts and sciences, the School of Performance, Visualization, Fine Arts, the library's restructure, the journalism program, the expansion of the Bush School, the student health, now being a part of the Health Science Center, as well as several million new dollars being invested in mental health that will be rolling out. All of these obviously could be their own presentation. This presentation was meant more to focus on those operational areas, but we did want to touch on all these. And again, if any of you want to go deeper into this, or you have groups that you're with that want us to talk a little bit more about where these things are at, we can go into a great bit of detail. But obviously, we talk about path forward. You have to talk about some of these major initiatives as well. But the focus of this presentation was the operational part. So just in terms of what's next, I know we've taken a lot of time, but we really are going to try to be aggressive, particularly beginning in August and throughout September and the rest of the year, on getting out and talking to groups. That's why I'd love to hear, if it's not right away right now, any of you can feel free to email or call me or Alan and talk about this. On the Path Forward website, a lot of slides at the bottom, more detailed information at the Path Forward website. So far up to this point, we've been posting all the implementation memos and some of the other stuff. We're going to start putting this kind of information out there, as well as a lot more information on timelines, Gantt charts, and those kind of things. Again, if somebody really wants to dig into some of the details here, we're going to make sure that Path Forward website has a lot of content on it. It's not all there yet. We're still getting a little organized, but it's getting that. I talked about change management oversight. We're going to be tracking the process of all these different initiatives to make sure we know what's happening and people are staying on track of things. You may know this already, but Dr. Banks is going to have her State of the University address on September 28th. That's going to talk about some of these issues, but really it's going to be talking about the next stage of her vision. Where are the big investments? Where are we going to be doing new things? And all this work we've done to hopefully build a better foundation. Where is that all going to take us into the next year and into the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years? And then I mentioned at the very beginning the 1-year assessment we're going to do on all these initiatives and report back to the entire community in terms of where we had success, where we have challenges, where we need to make changes, or whatever else. So with that, I will stop sharing. And Dr. Hammond, I appreciate all the time you've given us, or Dr. Rice, whichever one of you. We have time for questions, be more than happy to, or we go ahead and move on to Dave and get more deep into HR.
Dale, you're now in charge.
Well, thanks, Tracy, for leaping in there, because we had some Zoom challenges earlier. Anyway, I see some hands up. So I think that before we move to Damon, it would be, if he doesn't mind, it would be good to, while this part of the presentation is fresh in people's minds, pose any questions to Greg and Alan. And I will note that, well, Dana, I hope you're going to go ahead and ask the very good question you posted in the chat earlier, because people like me who teach in computer labs have a great deal of concern about the, the centralization of IT, with the hope that we have the kind of rapid response to problems that we've had in the past. So, Senator Gaddy, why don't you start out?
Great. Thank you very much, Senator Rice. I really, my major question is really about classroom support. When you centralize everything and we're going to have somebody to call, presumably that's going to be a central somebody to call and not somebody that's local in the building in which we're teaching or next door in our local venue. And if that's the case, how do we get people there in 5 minutes when class started at 10 and it's 5 to 10, or it's 10 o'clock and we're dead in the water and we need somebody, and Central is on the other side of campus? So what's the plan for keeping some of those same people and maybe administratively keeping them centralized, but having them housed where they're currently housed and doing the lion's share of the work that keeps us rolling and rocking all over campus?
Yeah, Senator Gaddy, that's a good question. And the centralization does not mean that everybody's moving to one big building somewhere. You're still going to see folks decentralized, and frankly, in terms of their location and their responsibility. So it's not so much that we're trying to move them all into one building. You'll probably, in most cases, I don't want to say in all cases, in most cases, it'll probably be the same person you've gotten used to dealing with in the past. So there's not those kind of changes. When we say centralization, and Alan referred to it a few times, centralization is not a great word, because everybody does think you're putting people into a big tent somewhere, and that's not really the goal. It's really about making sure that from an accounting perspective, and a accountability perspective, people know, what they have to do, but they're still responding quickly to where they are. They're still going to be located out there in the buildings with the same similar kind of assignments that they have in the past. But it does allow us to have, the ability, if there's an area that's not having issues and there's an area of campus that has huge issues, it allows us to move people from one part of campus into another part of campus where there may be other issues. It gives us a great deal more flexibility and the ability to move resources around as necessary to meet the needs of the campus. But in terms of like your question, I've got a class in 5 minutes and something won't turn on. That person down the hall you've always dealt with should still be the person you're dealing with. We're not trying to change those kind of things.
And to follow on with that is Senator Epstein's question was a curiosity about where AI and Canvas will live. Is that do you envision that changing, or is that actually going to still be in similar places?
Yeah, that's a detail I'm not sure of. Alan or Tim, do either one of you know that? If not, I'll get an answer and get back to you on that, but I can't, if I answer that, I'll be making it up, so.
Okay,
Could you repeat the question again?
It's Janice Epstein's question about where AI and Canvas will live, those and the support for that, because that's Canvas is a huge support structure that we have to maintain that. And maybe Senator Epstein wants to follow on and chime in on that since it was her question.
No, that's about it. I know that they've switched to some sort of support through Canvas, and I did interact with them once, and they had no idea. It was a gigantic waste of time because they don't know the particulars of things at A&M. We don't have a very standard Canvas setup apparently. And so I would like to see some more of the support rolling back to A&M where people are at least familiar with things like athletic observers and other issues. So that was pretty painful.
Yeah, so good point, Janice, and thanks for that feedback. We looked at the HR in terms of filling those technical positions in AI. This is an ongoing discussion with AI as well as with Ed Pearson as to who's going to support Canvas, but right now it remains in AI, and that's the plan that we know right now. So, but it is important for me to know that calling the centralized services was not very useful at all. We could spend those dollars elsewhere. Thanks.
Senator Price.
So you asked, you wanted feedback on this, and I think a lot of us could provide a lot more feedback than we probably have time for in the Senate meeting today. And I was wondering if there's a good way to do this. For example, you have the phrase reduction of administrative burden for faculty, which sounds good on paper, but in reality, that sounds almost like butt out. You don't have to worry about any of this stuff. So the question in all of this is how can we provide throughout the whole process consistent and feedback, because all the information that you've talked about or information sharing is very one way. So how can we provide information to you and feedback to you through this whole process? And your KPIs, are they going to be customer focused? In other words, the faculty being able to be satisfied in all of this? Thank you.
I muted myself there. Sorry about that. Good question. So one, in terms of feedback, we appreciate the opportunity to keep coming back to this group because this is an important group for us to get feedback. So as often as you'll let us come back and talk about it, and we can break out specific pieces or concerns or questions or issues that you have as we go through this process. In terms of immediate feedback, either on the presentation or a specific case, I would say one, email me directly or call me directly. A whole lot of you have my mobile number. Feel free to use it to text or call. And my email is ghartman, GHARTMAN @tamu.edu. And a lot of you know how to get hold of Tim or Alan as well too. So feel free to do that. I think that's the best way to do it. So either reach out specifically and directly with us, happy to answer those questions and talk about those kind of things. Or we'll keep coming back to this group and other groups as well too. In terms of KPIs, actually faculty is a significant constituency that we have to show response to and that we're serving. So I think you'll see as we start to roll out the kind of performance measures, the way we're going to hold ourselves accountable to service, you'll see that develop. But we're still working on those service measures right now, so we're not there yet.
Greg, I'd like to add just a little bit, not to belabor the topic too much, but we use the word service function areas for a reason. And we view these very much as service organizations, and have built into their planning very much a customer service kind of feedback process. And so we anticipate that some of them already are, on a very regular basis, are going back to their customers, whether that be the colleges or the departments or the non-academic units as well, and getting that kind of feedback, and making sure that they're doing things that are appropriate and for what you need. So we use that word service very intentionally.
Thank you. A number of people have also sent questions to Speaker-elect Hammond, and so I would like to allow her to come in with a question periodically as we move through the raised hands. So Tracy, would you like to offer one of those questions that were directed to you now?
Yeah. The inflation rate is approaching 9% in 2022. Does the university have any plans for changing to the merit increases or faculty and staff salary adjustments to account for inflation? And I'll add to that I saw that the merit was capped at 2%, I guess, because it goes in 2 years in a row. And so, there's been a lot of questions about that as well.
Yeah, there's no current plan to increase the merit. That's obviously we have to go to the regents for those kind of approvals as well too. And there's an August regents meeting coming up that we may have a conversation with them about. So answer is right now, no, that's not. We'd have to have a conversation about that. I do know from a compensation perspective, there's a compensation equity process going on that Damon may get a chance to talk about here at some point too, to look at as we look at some of these areas where labor costs have gone up. Are we keeping up with the labor market and those kind of things, and make appropriate changes there as opposed to across the board merit? Are there areas where we need to invest more in our labor force? So that's part of the work that's going on there.
Senator McGill.
I'm in Coles, and we recently went through a sort of a similar reorganization with IT and having advisors and bookkeepers and so forth becoming so-called centralized. And especially for IT, I think all of us that were had this put on us found it to be a week or two challenge to even get anything. And simple things like saying that I had to change my email to something that would not work in the classroom just did not seem to be very reasonable. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I think there's been mistakes made in the past in terms of the way some things have done. I mean, I can't justify or defend those kind of things. I'm hoping that the way we're approaching this now is going to actually require a better response rate and accountability. If things aren't being done well, IT reports to me, I need to know about that, and I'll need to deal with those things directly. So, I mean, that's the best I can say. Again, there's been mistakes made. I don't think IT's been perfect in the past. I don't think it's been perfect in the future, but our ability to hold people accountable and to know specifically where was the mistake made and who should be held responsible for that mistake being made is what this is trying to get at in terms of an accountability. And again, we're not making everyone come in one big place and all have to operate as one large central organization. There's still going to be people out there independently continuing to serve their customers the way they have in the past.
Senator Miranda.
So this also continues on the same vein of centralization and experiences that we've had with, for example, websites which need to be changed, forward-looking websites that where the students come to look for information and such. And in a few situations now, in the last couple months, we've been told, no, we can't really make any changes to those. We don't have permission to do that. We have to, it goes up a chain of command. That seems very opaque to us. And so I'm concerned that in this drive towards centralization, we're losing the ability to be flexible, to innovate, to be timely. And that worries me when we have to deal with new student classes coming in and things like that.
Well, that's a legitimate concern. It's an issue we've got to be careful about. I mean, the other side of that is we currently have a lot of websites right now that are not kept up to date, that have incorrect information. that are just wrong and have all kinds of problems with them as well too. So what we got to do is be able to make sure that there's some sort of consistency, not only in terms of brand, as we've talked about, but just frankly, data. There's an awful lot. When you go look at the complexity of websites we have across the university, there's just an enormous number of bad websites that just aren't kept up and those kind of things too. So we've got to come up with some sort of system to be able to manage it where there's accountability for people keeping them up and for consistency on those websites. If it gets to be a huge wait to get things approved and those kind of things, obviously that's just as bad a problem, and it doesn't have to be that way. So we need to fix it in a way where we can still move quickly and have resources that move things. But we've also got to deal with the fact that we have a lot of inconsistency in bad websites. So there's a little bit of a jerk here as we try to kind of figure things out and get things sort of stopped and get some sort of a process in place to be able to do it. But we're going to need to be able to move quickly to not have the kind of problems you're talking about right now. But to leave it as it has been in the past will continue to be a huge problem because we really had some challenges and difficulties with incorrect websites and websites that are literally years and years obsolete and those kind of things.
So just to follow up, this is actually creating the problem that you're trying to avoid because our sites are getting out of date when they need to be updated for the next student year.
Right.
But, so in a sense, this is exacerbating the problem that you want to prevent.
Well, our hope is not that it all has to be done by one person or one group. They're still going to be able to do the updates in their individual departments. We want to set up some consistent standards. Alan talked a lot about brand council and policies and procedures being more clear that people have to adhere to. There's been a lack of discipline when it comes to those kind of things. But again, this should require, a lot of waiting for approvals and other things. There should be decentralized ways to update these, but hopefully we'll get some sort of consistent policy, procedures, and expectations of what those updates look like. Right now, it's kind of scattered. It's a little bit too autonomous, I think, to guarantee that we have good quality on the websites. So your concerns are, but she's very, very fair. I don't want to minimize them, but we're trying to fix it from where it currently is to a better place and hopefully not make it worse because that would be a bad thing. So.
Tracy, do you have another one from the chat?
Yeah, I do. So it was mentioned that there will be a 1-year assessment done a year from now to determine how well the restructuring is performing. There are a couple of questions. 1, who will perform the assessment? 2, how will the benchmarks for assessments be determined? And 3, what will happen if it is determined that the performance is not up to expectations?
So a lot of those first questions, who and the methodology for that still being discussed. We're still trying to figure that out, whether it's an internal, I've wondered about maybe some of the management experts at the May School or some other folks like that we could use to do that. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that's what it's going to be, but just can we do it internally or do we need someone from the outside to do it? My hope is that we would do it internally with the right experts because we've got a lot of folks who are really good at this, but we're still trying to sort through and figure that out. If we don't do well, I mean, part of it is to, identify what we don't do well, make people aware of that. So we're transparent about that. We talk about where there's problems, try to fix those problems. If people are not being held accountable, we may need to think about people who are in charge of things and making them not in charge of things anymore if they're not doing a good job. It just depends on what exactly the issue is and what happened. Some may be bad ideas that, just in implementation, they didn't work. And it's not gonna work the way we hoped it, and we'll have to modify where we're going with the recommendation or whatever. That'll just be it'll be a case-by-case basis to, I think, determine why we fell short.
Senator Kolosinski.
Oh, yes, thank you. So Greg, I like that you mentioned some of the management experts at the May School. So we actually put out a white paper a few months ago regarding centralization and matrix organizations. And one of the things we emphasized was that the literature seems to suggest that it's really important to have dual layers of accountability. So it's important that, say, Marcom or finance or HR people have accountability to the central administration to ensure that university-wide policies and procedures are being followed and the interests of the university as a whole is being upheld. But it's also very important that they have accountability to the local leadership. So say it's important that the associate dean for finance have accountability toward the local dean, the college dean, as well as to the CFO and similar analogous things with regard to HR and Marcom. Is that how you're planning on proceeding? Are you planning on having this sort of dual accountability so that there's accountability to the local customers in addition to the central administration?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I read that white paper you're talking about, and it was very useful and helpful in terms of thinking about this. So yeah, that's exactly the dotted line, solid line thing that we're talking about there. So if you have, if just say the example, John Crawford has a finance person reporting to him on a solid line in terms of work that's going to be done, but there's a solid line to a dean or associate dean or whatever. Part of what we've talked about and we've built into this process is when John Crawford does an evaluation of that person, he or whoever that person may be needs to get comments and input from the direct client of that person as well as him. So it isn't just John deciding did this person do well, but how good a job did this person do? What's the reputation of this person with that dean or associate dean, whoever their client is, in terms of how well they're done? And so how do we develop some sort of dotted line, solid line process as a part of the evaluation?
Okay, so you are in fact moving toward that. That's
Yeah.
good to hear.
And that's one of the things Damon's groups is helping us think about that, because that's complex. That adds a level of complexity, and we're trying to be simple whenever we can, but we've got to do that. And so we're talking through how we're going to do evaluations in the future in this matrix structure.
Okay, good. So just to note, I think this dotted line, solid line thing, all the experts that we looked at tended to shy away from that language.
Yeah,
Is that kind of implies that one is superior to another, and in fact both have the local input is just as important as the
yeah.
upper.
I know some people get hung up on the nomenclature, and maybe there's a better way to say it, but that sort of dual reporting where you actually understand it, somebody's got to be in charge, and so you got to figure out the right way to do it. So, but I recognize what you're talking about, but that sort of concept is what we're trying to deal with.
Great, thank you.
Senator Haney. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, thank you, Speaker Rice. One thing I wanted to reinforce was this idea that during centralization, there also needs to be a level of autonomy left so that we can actually respond. Being in Galveston, we're physically 100 or more miles away. And so our IT needs the ability and authorization to be able to handle our issues instead of what we usually get in a variety of different departments here is, well, we have to wait for College Station to do that. And that just won't work. And that's not a sustainable model. So I hope that in the process of centralization, you're also keeping in mind that the branch campuses, and I won't speak for Cutter, but we need the ability to have some level of autonomy to handle the technical issues that come up in-house instead of just waiting for the mechanisms to work within College Station. The other thing, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Adam. I was just going to say, you bring it's not only IT, but it's with facilities and other too. We need the same kind of thing. And you may or may not be aware, we're actually doing some further work with Galveston to actually think about the way your operations is structured and how do we do a better job in terms of providing exactly what you're talking about, the appropriate amount of accountability, but also consistency with university policy and those kind of things. It's not just going to be in IT. And we're also looking at the HSC campuses, McAllen, as well in terms of the same concept of, because I don't think, frankly, my perception is that College Station infrastructure has not always thought of themselves as being accountable to those remote campuses. Remote, that's a bad word, but you know what I mean, those other campuses. And I think that's one of the things we're trying to build in. How do we build a structure in place where the success of Galveston, when it comes to IT or facilities, is part of the measurement of how well we're doing here in College Station. Just because we're in College Station doesn't mean we have accountability to the success of Galveston or McAllen.
No,
so structuring that.
Yeah, believe me, we've heard about the attention that you're paying to us, and that's caused a lot of anxiety on the island for that. But
we can't not pay attention to you. I mean, you got to pay attention to fix things. So that way.
Positive attention. The other thing that was mentioned in one of Tracy's questions was the pay equity issue, and I hope that we can finally start to address the Galveston issue, which preceded the inflation we're seeing now. and the disparity. Galveston is in the Houston labor market, whereas Bryan, College Station, is not in that. And that creates even more pressure with the hyperinflation. We can't keep staff. I know keeping staff and attracting qualified faculty is a challenge throughout the entire system, but particularly here where the cost of living is much higher in Galveston than it is in Bryan, College Station. So I hope that's a part of the calculus in all of this reevaluation.
Yeah, it is. Damon and I have talked about that. Hopefully Damon's going to have some time here still to talk about stuff, and compensation equity is something he and his team are working on now. We've talked specifically about the Galveston and our other campuses as well too.
And we'll take one more question and then move to Damon so that we definitely have time for him as well. So Senator Arroyave.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So yes, again, I'm sorry to bring this up, this issue of, centralization again. The issue with communication with regards to websites was brought up, but in science, we are competing against top universities in the US and the world. And sometimes we have to be nimble in the way we communicate findings, accomplishments, important results and papers that come out of our faculty, students, and postdocs. And my experience has been that when there is a strong emphasis on centralization to make sure that we all keep the branding right, sometimes we lose the nimbleness that we need to come out with our story early enough, right? So sometimes by the time a story has been cleared or a tweet has been cleared or some other means of communication has been let move forward, it may be already too late. We may have lost already the sense of urgency and novelty, and other places are more nimble and are better at immediately telling the story to the point that this puts us at a disadvantage when it comes to competing against our peers and aspirational peers. So I understand the need to have a unified message, but again, we have a very complex system. We are trying to do the best science we can do. And if we are not able to do proper justice to the work that we do on time, we lose the story. That's one of my concerns.
No, that's legit. And it's important to remember, it's not that one single person has to be approving everything. The goal is to have very clear standards, expectations, accountability measures so that folks can act autonomously, but they need to be held accountable to what they do. And so they need to be consistent in terms of message, branding, response times. Hopefully we should never get to a situation where one person sitting somewhere has to approve everything, because that's when you get those bottlenecks and things take too long. We should have people out there who are able to make quick decisions, but there's got to be a discipline to following policies and procedures which have to be set up. And frankly, that discipline has been lost for a while here, I think, and that's what we're trying to build. But the concerns you guys have about slowing things down are legit. If that's what we're doing, we're not meeting the goals. But I also don't think we can say what's been happening for the last few years has been great either. And so we've got to figure a way to be consistent, to get messages out quickly, and for folks to know what their expectations are and what they can do on their own in order to move quickly.
So I would like to move to Damon now, but
I have two private questions that were submitted well before Raimundo. I was wondering if they're quick. Can I just give them a voice since they were submitted earlier?
Well, I was hoping, Tracy, that Greg would stick around so that we could you would have the opportunity to present all of the questions.
Okay, well, yeah, there were only two left and they were follow-ups on the other questions.
If there are only two, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so a follow-up on the last question that I read a couple of questions ago. So will there be a working group made that includes faculty input on the one-year restructuring assessment? How will you guarantee that group will not consist only of inner circle or compliant faculty who will rubber stamp any assessment?
Again, we're still figuring out what that one-year assessment is going to look like. So I can't say. That's a good idea. And I'd have no problem working with the faculty senate, whoever else, to come up with an advisory group to work with that group. I think that's a great idea.
Fantastic. And the last one is, How is BCS not in the Houston employment market relative to Galveston?
Repeat the question. I don't think.
How is BCS not in the Houston employment market relative to Galveston? Bryan College Station.
Yeah, that's a Damon question. I don't know labor markets well. So Damon, do you know an answer to that?
And Adam, did you want to clarify that?
Yeah, our salaries are set based on Bryan College Station, and they're just not in the same market, is my understanding. So that's why it's relevant.
Yeah, I can speak to the pay plan, the way it was set up originally, I guess about 6 years ago, that there was a major market that was comparative, and Galveston was in the major market, whereas Bryan College Station is in the system market or local market. So there's already a view into what a major market would be. But again, I will preface it by saying that's why we're having to do an extensive class and comp review now, because all of those pay plans were put into place prior to Workday, which was about 5 years ago. So that's what we're looking at, is leveling the playing field, ensuring that we're looking at the relevant labor markets as it would relate to the compensation assessments that we're reviewing. So that's an excellent point, but I can only speak to a local market and a major market. But Galveston is in a major market, whereas Bryan College Station is in the local market.
Then Damon, would you like to go ahead with your
Sure.
presentation? Sorry that it's taking a while to get to you, but I think this has been a great dialogue today. It's been an opportunity for people to ask questions, to assess how things are going, and I'm certain that there's going to be a lot more feedback directed at Greg and Alan and you as well as we make it through the months ahead. So go ahead, Damon.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker Rice. I do appreciate the opportunity. I'm glad it worked out for us to be here along with Greg and Alan, because these are things that we've worked on since August, and a lot of the things that we keep ironing out of the details that are brought to our attention through our working groups, through different types of discussions that we've had with our constituents and our customers. I was originally put on or asked to be on the agenda back in June to talk about benefits related items. So I wanted to make sure before we get too caught up into the weeds of centralization or the path forward, that everyone is fully aware that open enrollment for benefits is this month in July, and that we are very restrictive on that in reminding folks that July the 30th and 31st fall on a weekend. So that means that if you're planning on making any changes to your benefits, your particular selections, as well as it relates to any of your out-of-pocket spending accounts or health saving accounts, those need to be done by July 30th. So our hands are pretty much tied on making any corrections after that date. So please, I'm happy to talk to more forums, to talk to more of your peers, more of your colleagues, but I just want to make sure that we're spreading the word. We're trying social media outlets. We're doing email campaigns. There's also, there was a meeting last week for an open house, but for any retirees that you may know or are related to or may be a neighbor to, please make sure that they're aware that there's an in-person meeting for retirees on July 15th. And there have been messages that have been sent out along these lines. I just want to take that opportunity to make sure folks were aware that open enrollment for our benefits is this month in July, and it's super critical that we pay close attention to those dates this year. And again, because we've spent a lot of time talking about the path forward, I'll be very brief as I possibly can be, to focus in on three major characteristics as it relates to human resources and organizational effectiveness in the path forward. And one of the first pillars that we're going to talk through is about the transition. And there has been a lot of confusion about what does centralization mean? And are you going to take all of our people that we already know and put them out at the GSC and we'll have to put a ticket in? And just a resounding no, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to make sure that the people that you are already associating human resources with or payroll services with, those individuals will likely be the exact same people sitting in, likely the exact same proximity that they're currently sitting in, so that if you have a question about a benefit, or you have a question about employee relations or classification compensation, we want to be sure that we have readily available resources that are deployed across campus. And that includes Cutter, it includes Galveston, it includes the Rio Grande Valley, Round Rock, any place that we have an individual. We're looking to associate HR professionals in each of those areas that can provide generalist functions, and then also have the opportunity to elevate any specific concerns to a specialist level. So higher level of HR experience and higher level of HR customer service is what we're building our reputation on, and what we're building our new structure on. You know, some of the things that we've talked through are that I've heard in the questions and comments about best practices. Well, this works well for me in Mays, but it doesn't work well for me in the School of Public Health. What we're wanting to do during this next couple of months in meeting with our newly identified individuals are what are the best practices that seem to be working well for hiring, for recruiting, for costing allocations, for payroll cost transfers, for how we get researchers on board. Those are the types of things that we're looking now to advocate for our best practices, so that collectively, as we go into the fall, we want to make sure that we're leveraging the technology and the personnel that can help advocate for those extremely more efficient and effective processes. And I've heard the term bottleneck a lot the last hour. And what I think you will realize is that currently everything has to come to a central location. And the way we're building our structure is to have 6 uniform hubs. You'll hear the term service hubs. These hubs are designed so that Workday can be segmented in such a way to be more responsive, and we have levels of authority embedded within a service hub, so that instead of waiting on one person that can only approve things, now there may be 6 people that can approve things, and we'll train people consistently. We'll hold people accountable consistently. So those are the things that we're just not talking about building an efficient structure. We're truly changing the way Workday is going to be working, changing the way that we're training, changing the way that we're holding folks accountable. So that's how our structure will continue to be changed to advocate for more extraordinary customer service and efficiency. We want to form advisory groups. I talked to Speaker Rice and Dr. Epstein earlier about how living well was something that we thought was something that was not accessible by faculty particularly, but we're advocating for higher levels of service. Also with benefits, how do we get out in front of the forums or the customers that need to know these things? Do we develop QR codes that we can put in hallways, or do we put signs? Do we barcode people's arms that they look? I'm just kidding, we won't do that. Apparently that's a health risk or something, I don't know. But how can we work with you to let us know how do we reach the constituency that means most to us, and that we can advocate for extraordinary customer service in the faculty ranks? So those advisory groups are things that we're going to hold that are valuable to our success in the future, because feedback is how we're going to continue to improve. And get away from the, well, we've always done it that way. And I even had some buttons made up. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it says, but we've always done it that way, right? So that's one of our mantras that we're moving forward, is we can be customer focused. If our folks have always been here at the GSE and not walked a mile in your shoes, not seen what it's like, now with these deployed individuals that are already working with you, we want to advocate for what works best for you, and then transition to a model to where it's consistent from Cutter to the Rio Grande Valley and Galveston, all points in between. And so that's pillar one, is as we transition, we're listening, we're learning, we're advocating for continuity and efficiency through leveraging personnel as well as technology. The second pillar I move to is building. So we're building something new. And what we're going to do is focus on customer service. And how do we focus on customer service? Through relationships. As we develop relationships with you as Faculty Senate, with CPI, with the Staff Council, with the Dean's Council, all of these other affinity groups, and also have personal contact with you through advisory councils and personal contacts and working groups. What makes the most sense for you in these different types of areas? What forums, what department meetings can we go and show up to? What can we do to listen? I think before we've kind of rested on our laurels of sending one email out a week and then expecting everyone to know what to do and be responsive to it. I'm advocating to our teams here that we need to be out. We need to be in the weeds with our teams, with our constituents and our customers, and ensuring that we're meeting you where you need to be met and not just telling you what we think you need to know. And to that point, it's about the classification compensation. You know, if we've always advocated for this is the way we're going to do it, but we're not mindful of what the market's doing, we're advocating that we need to build a team that's more responsive to those needs. We need to know what police department needs. We need to know what postdocs need to be hired at certain levels of expertise and specialty. So those are types of things that we're advocating for as we're building this and training our personnel. And one of our groups, to Adam's point, will be that we focus our Galveston cohort of HR professionals to look at all remote campuses. Our mindset there is as we're building the service team out of a branch campus or a remote campus, then everything is remote, right? So there can be a dedicated focus to living well, to class and comp, to all things that relate to remote campuses that otherwise may have just been buried or assumed it was going to be done like it is in College Station. So that's one of the things that we're fine tuning our approach to ensure that we have our outreach and our focus on all affected parties. And then part of our building is refining our hiring and our onboarding and our succession planning models, creating a thriving plan to where administrators, faculty, staff, and technical experts continue to grow and develop and be retained for what value they bring to our organization. And then the career paths that Greg mentioned. One of the things that we'll realize within operational units is that no longer does a person have to hop department to department, college to college to realize that there's a career in each of these specialty units. So career paths are something that we're continuing to advocate for and ensure that we can retain and maintain the employee success. Last thing I'll mention is measure. Not only do we want to look at how we track numbers or metrics, but what's the qualitative measures that we can put in place? What surveys, what assessments, what types of discussions can we entertain so that we're ensuring that all employees, including supervisors and faculty and those that are providing support services, are they thriving? Are they realizing what's intended to be an employer of record, an employee of a preferred employer across all institutions? So that's important to us, not just how many widgets are we turning out, but what types of quality of service are we providing? And another element that we're building into our group is a focus on continuous improvement. And we want to be accountable for marked improvement, whether that be through class and comp avenues, whether that mean that I'm accountable to Greg and to President Banks for what our team does, but I want to sit down to ensure that our structure, we will have an individual that is responsible for each of these hub leaderships, that they will regularly be meeting with the deans, with department heads, with whatever types of forums are available specific to that area or that hub, so that we're responsive to those needs and continue to improve. Last thing I'll mention is, it's those relationships that we have currently with Tim Scott, with NK Anand, and our leadership team of how we can advocate for what works best for faculty. And Faculty Affairs is developing a lot of programs as well, and we want to help and assist when we can and as much as we can to ensure that we are a successful partnership and just don't remain on islands so that we're duplicating efforts. So I know that's a quick rundown of a lot of different things, but I just wanted to, again, thank you for the opportunity to meet. I'm happy to work with working groups. Many of your representatives have been on our working groups, and we appreciate each of their time and input throughout this process. So I'll pause there to see if there's any specific questions.
Thank you. Questions for Damon? Senator Price?
To what I put in the chat, I have heard HR too often say total compensation, our benefits are great, and a lot of companies' benefits are great nowadays, but we keep using those benefits as an excuse not to pay competitively. And we have plenty of local businesses hiring in at $18.50 and other things an hour. And how do we possibly expect people to stay? Plus, those future benefits like retirement are directly affected by the amount they're compensated. So not only are they lowly paid in the beginning, that compensation that they get in the future is going to be low as well. So I hope that HR would start thinking about that as they move forward. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I like to use the term of deferred maintenance, right? I mean, we often budget for things that we anticipate may change in the future. And I think we're at a point, Greg and I have had this conversation to where we can invest in what it looks like for the future of our teams. And that means doing these salary assessments, looking and projecting where are we on the market. You know, if we're only hitting about 40% of the market or 10% of the market, we need to find out where we need to be in the market. And if we're trying to be at 60%, here's what it's going to cost us to get there. If industry is looking at minimum wage of $18, but we're still at $17 an hour, what does that mean to get us there? So there will be an investment. And it's important that, particularly as we're going into this next legislative session, that we can provide real data, that we can look at exactly what we're talking about. And true, total compensation is something we often refer back to because it seems that we are lucrative in our benefits. But now, as we're comparing to the new modern era where people are having to hire people at a disadvantage for us because we're not as responsive from a compensation measure, we do need to be more out in front of these things and take them into consideration. So we've committed 4 different individuals to looking at that this summer and working with Dr. Anand on what it may look like also for faculty. But it's something that we're truly needing to invest in. I couldn't agree more.
Senator Kolosinski.
Yes, thank you. So I guess my question is regarding keeping our salaries with inflation, up with inflation, and preventing pay cuts in real terms, which we're all taking at the moment because of inflation, our salaries not keeping up. Is this something that's going to require legislative action, or can the regions do something on their own without the legislature? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, there would be budget. What I'm speaking to mainly is that the budgets have been set for this current fiscal year, based on what has been agreed to in previous legislative sessions. If there is a redistribution of funds and accounts, that's something that would have to be approved locally and internally. But I was thinking progressively forward, if this is something that we can leverage as a state institution, going back to the legislature to see, is there a cost of living that could be something that we could advocate for? Is this something that we just need to budget for as a university?
So what you're saying basically then is that the budget has been set already, cannot be increased in general, so without legislative action. So if we want to increase salaries across the board.
I'm only stating that the majority of the funds that are allocated for salaries typically are determined at a state level. However, that does not mean that that's the only source of budget or funds that can be advocated or leaned on for these types of measures should the president leadership determine that this is important in this fiscal year, the next fiscal year, and the following fiscal years. I'm merely looking at, from my perspective in HR, how can we forecast to provide information to leadership to say, if we're asking, here's how we should budget.
Got it. Thank you.
And I see NK.
Just to add to what Damon was saying, the other source of funding is the tuition increase. And, A&M has chosen to freeze tuition for 2 years. We didn't have a tuition increase last year and didn't have a tuition increase this year. And our office, with the leadership of Dr. Heather Lynch, she's kind of resurrecting the faculty equity study that we used to do, which started about 6-7 years back. Dr. Lori Taylor in Bush School is helping. And so, hopefully our goal is to distribute the results to the deans in the fall semester.
Thank you. I think in some ways what Senator Kolosinski's question went to is there a political reality that the legislature sets a budget every 2 years, and sometimes it is difficult to not only ask the questions, well, within those budgets, how do we deal with things like inflation, but also the very real problems of the salary inequities, for example, that exist and need to be fixed. So it is a very complex issue to deal with. Are there any other questions that anyone had?
No, nothing, no questions, just comments that I retweeted or reposted.
Okay, thank you. Then I especially want to thank Greg, Alan, and Damon for taking time to be with us today. We very, very much appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for everyone.
Yeah, thank you all. I hope you'll continue to invite us back. Appreciate it.
We will.
Thanks, everyone.
And then in terms of announcements, we have none today. Speaker comments. Normally, I would have had comments and had planned on some, but life got in the way. Last week, I broke my ankle, was dealing with that, seeing a specialist and all, and then thought, well, I'll have time yesterday on my 13-hour drive from Santa Fe back to College Station. But I discovered very quickly on that car ride, which any of you who've done a 13-hour drive with a broken bone may know that you give up thinking about things like that and are fixated on the pain from the broken bone. So that's my honest confession on why we don't have any eloquent speaker comments today. But we'll move on to approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections to the June 13th meeting minutes found in attachment B?
There was one comment from Matt Sachs that the wrong report was loaded up for the research committee. Matt, did you want to comment? Is he still here?
Yes. Inadvertently, the 2021 report was loaded, not the 2022 report was loaded. If I have a chance to report today, I will give the 2022 summary.
That's good, and we'll make sure that that's taken care of. Anything else? Then with that correction, I declare the minutes approved as distributed. Moving on to the consent agenda, are there any questions or concerns on the July 11th consent agenda? Hearing no questions or concerns, I declare the July consent agenda approved as presented. We are going to do the committee reports, but I thought this would be, since we're moving through some items of business, let's quickly move on to the new business that we have in terms of the approval of the degree candidates. Secretary Epstein, would you please move approval of attachment D1 and read the number of degrees being awarded by location?
I move approval of attachment D1. The following number of candidates will be receiving degrees, including bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees. The combined colleges and schools in College Station, 1,730, Galveston, 62, Cutter, 5, College of Dentistry in Dallas, 3, Law School in Fort Worth, 44, College of Pharmacy in Kingsville, 1, for a total of 1,845 degrees to be awarded this summer.
Secretary Epstein has moved attachment D1. Is there any discussion? Then Speaker-elect Hammond, will you launch a poll?
Seems to have stopped. We have 49 out of 49 people who participated said yes, so 100%.
Okay, then the degree candidates are approved. And since we're moving right through items of new business, we could also move to the changes in the bylaws regarding the Core Curriculum Council, which is attachment D2. Secretary Epstein, would you please move the attachment?
I move approval of attachment D2.
This was presented a month ago. Is there any further discussion? Speaker-elect Hammond, please launch the poll.
Okay, well, this time we got 50 responses. I will end the poll and share the results. We got 49 out of 50 voting yes.
Okay, thank you. Then that bylaw change is approved, and just to note, it takes effect 30 days after we approve it, so it'll be in effect going forward. Now to backtrack to committee reports, and this is an opportunity for committees who elect to do so to provide a brief end of year summary of their work. And I will go through them in order. So academic affairs, do we have a year-end report?
Yes, we do. My name is Megan Reynolds, and I have the report for the Academic Affairs Committee. I'll share my screen real quick. Oop, wrong one. Is it showing the right screen?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
It was? Okay, sorry.
It was. Yes,
it wasn't
it was.
showing it on mine. Okay. All right. So we have Yava Jones Hall and I were the two co-chairs. We're both first-year senators, so this was an interesting experience for us to run a committee. So we had 4 charges. The first charge was examining student mental health concerns, including resources available to faculty and assist students in need. We noted that in the first meeting of the Senate year, we had Dr. Banks, who was very proactive, very interested in student mental health and faculty mental health, and she promised to increase budget and other resources for student mental health. And we just heard that in the MTT report, in the path forward, we're going to see some of those resources come to fruition. So we hope to continue to monitor those in the future. Our second charge was consider proposing changes in the academic year schedule, including the potential addition of a fall break. We had a subcommittee that looked at this, and we sent in primary and secondary recommendations. Unfortunately, it was really short turnaround before the decision was made. The primary recommendation was extending Thanksgiving break, and our secondary recommendation was the October break. Some considerations that we looked at were how the summer break would be reduced specifically for those who teach all 3 semesters, making sure that they had enough time to have a good break in there between summer and fall. And then also the large laboratory courses and the effect of having breaks that would interfere with full weeks worth of these large classes. So obviously the secondary recommendation was the one that was taken. The October break will have 2 days off in October, I think the 10th and 11th. Our third charge was to review the lessons we learned and are learning from the COVID teaching experience, especially things of value that we should take forward. We looked at the pros and cons of online classes, including the academic dishonesty that we all saw that occurred. We looked at students who manipulated the attendance rules and how we can maybe hone in on some of those and maybe give some more direction for that in the future if we ever have to have something like this again. And then specifically the faculty input, especially for those who are in the trenches doing the teaching, to make sure that they have some input and say in how things happen in the classroom and the attendance rules and things like that. And then our last charge was looking for ways the university and individual faculty members can step up the fight against academic dishonesty. We spoke with the university services on academic dishonesty, and we talked about possible training modules for students and faculty alike, using the first year experience classes as a good resource to encourage incoming students and teach them about what it means to be commit academic dishonesty, but also to keep in mind that for the upper level classes, they're pretty upper level students, they're pretty far removed from these first year experience classes and maybe need a refresher on what academic dishonesty means. So thinking about ways that we can provide those reminders. And then specifically on the faculty side, we talked about being very careful in the wording on syllabi. Instead of saying open book or open note, use instructor approved resources, for example, so that things aren't getting pulled from sources that faculty does not want. Other future concerns, academic freedom within the classroom, the disruptions that may be caused by the MGT report for certain majors and how those students are progressing through their classes, and then continuing to monitor those mental health resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Budget information.
Yes, thank you, Speaker Rice. So my name is Adam Pickens. I'm very much in the same boat as Senator Reynolds. I'm a first term senator, and so this was a fun experience. If you'll allow me to just a moment to share my screen. So for the 2021-2022 year, I really feel like a lot of our thunder has already been stolen by the previous discussion, because the main thing that we were talking about was faculty salaries, staff salaries, inflation, merit raises, all of the things that we've already talked about today. So a few of the things that that we came upon in our discussion, we were able to meet several times with Mr. John Crawford, which is the VP of Finance. We looked at the comparisons both within the state and across our peer institutions, the fellow SEC, AAU, and external AAU institutions. We are at the bottom of total, not total compensation, but total tuition and appropriations dollars. We are currently 9th among Texas state institutions in total appropriations for both tuitions and state appropriations dollars. So much of the things that have already been said, we think there is an opportunity for ongoing discussion about merit raises or whatever we would like to make that term be at this point. Dr. Anand has already mentioned that the Board of Regents has frozen tuition. So there's a couple of different ways that we can generate those funds for salaries. Those are tuition increases, headcount increases, or appropriations increases. So without dramatically increasing our student headcount, we are currently looking at state appropriations dollars. And so those have been our primary discussions with the administration. As you heard today, the administration is very aware of the salary issue, and it's a historic issue of not keeping up with inflation for faculty salaries, because we have never actually really kept up with inflation for faculty salaries. So like I said, administration is very receptive to the discussion, and so they are taking a lot of the information and going to the legislature. Any questions or comments?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This is also a good opportunity for me to note that we did have some new senators step in to leadership roles on committees. And I know that the entire executive committee was both grateful for the leadership of these first term senators, very, very appreciative of the work that they did this year. So I really want to extend that thanks to the first term senators who stepped forward to take on committee chairmanships. Legislative affairs.
Hello, I'm not as organized as my colleagues, and so I don't have slides. What I will say is the Legislative Affairs Committee met all year. We met with our Vice President for Governmental Relations, Norman Garza, who informed us many times about some of the activities that were happening. A lot of this is discussion because we're in interim, but we will be starting the next session next year. The Higher Education Committee for the Texas Legislature was charged at looking at faculty tenure, and this is something we have been monitoring very closely. We're very concerned about potential impact. Part of what we do is get that report and sort of try to provide feedback and perspective and even narrative that our government relations office can share with legislators. And just to kind of be aware in case, kind of situational awareness in case something does arise that is much more critical that we would need to engage our full Senate on. Right now, it's more listening. They're looking at, again, faculty tenure. That's the big one that I think is going to be an issue. Workforce education, enrollment trends, history requirements. And a lot of it was monitoring also. The NIL agreements are taking a lot of the airspace for legislators and how they might legislate that or monitor that. So, but we will definitely keep everybody posted in case something does arise that is of major concern regarding the tenure issue, and also academic freedom. Although that wasn't specifically in their charge, that's always a concern for all of us, is constraints on academic freedom in the classroom. So right now we don't have anything that's actionable, but those are things that we do monitor. We're also working on setting up meetings with legislators on campus for the fall. So that is something else which we have in process. Thank you.
Personnel and welfare. We'll skip there. Planning.
Okay. I guess, as others have said, you can see this. So our main charges were, first of all, to investigate or do whatever you would think we can do about the reorganization proposed by President Banks And since we were not included in any of the committees or anything like that, we sent a memo to Speaker Rice and the EC urging that they request that senators be included as reporters on all the committees. We were asked to explore campus food deserts. We met with the university architect, Lillian Gonzalez, and the dining executive and director of facilities, Ralph Davila. And basically what we all found out was that there are a whole lot more options available than most of us were aware of, but they're not always noticeable, at least by faculty and staff and so forth. The students seem to know a lot about it. So maybe they could get some better wayfaring signs and ads. The food trucks that used to be so common were tried out at the Health Science Center. That's a real food desert, I guess. But they do have to pay a fairly substantial subcontract with Chartwell, so the prices, and maybe that's a reason it didn't work out, or just not enough people there. And then they had on their diagrams these circles where almost everybody would be within a 5-minute walking distance. They weren't very realistic because you can't walk straight lines from one place to another very often. The next thing we looked at, are actually in different order, but classroom assignments. We met with Nick Pawanka, the associate registrar in charge of classroom assignments, and he does have a master list for every classroom that he's in control of for every hour of every day. And so they do keep very, very close track. They try to make assignments to fit the size of the room, as well as the location that was requested and things like that, as best they can. And our only suggestion was that maybe if people are looking for a room, that site could be available at least as a read-only, so you could look and see where you might be able to get a room for your seminar or something like that. Campus mobility, we met with Debbie Lawler, the Executive Director of Transportation Services, and they've been undergoing a big outside review and service. So they had identified all sorts of congested areas and conflict sites between all sorts of transportation, walking, bikes, motorized, anything, and so forth. And they have been contracting with these experts for potential solutions. And they've tried out some of the things just on a temporary basis, putting up some temporary barriers and things like that. So they're really taking advantage of a lot of the new things, like the buses, every student with their cell phone can find out where it is when it's coming and things like that. So those are the things that we talked about this year. And then if you ever want to see what the actual charges or the duties of it are, this is what that is, and you can look at this sometime in the bylaws or whatever. So thank you.
Thank you. And research.
Thank you. Let me share my screen also. One second. I believe you can see that. Yes, so
yes.
The Faculty Senate, you can see it, correct?
Yes, we can.
So the Faculty Senate Research Committee met. Our last meeting where we worked on things was in April, and then in May we drafted this report, which I continued to work on with the help of the committee. So 2 charges that we looked at in detail were to coordinate with the CPI to find ways of working together on issues that are important for the CPI and the Senate and senators and faculty. Examine graduate student mental health concerns, including resources available to the students and faculty encountering issues that impact research. We took on the responsibility of beginning to see what resources were available to ensure the success of postdoctoral researchers, postdoctoral scientists. And finally, the MGT report, like any kind of change, would have impact or potential impact on research activities. And some of these, as we know during the semester, were causes of potential concern. So first, with the CPI, we met with Drs. Stelly, Banerjee, and Marin, who were the past, present, or not in order, present, future, and past chairs of the CPI. And we talked in detail about how we could work together. One consequence of this meeting was that myself and Senator Hammond met with CPI members and the University Staff Council multiple times to draft a response to specific recommendations from the MGT report. And Senator Rice, of course, participated and ultimately signed on for the Faculty Senate from that joint response. We met, or I met, with Drs. Banerjee and Dr. Escobar-Lemon to talk about how we could work together with the University Research Committee. And we will be doing that going forward as well. And finally, Dr. Baldoff is very proactive, and we met with I'll call him Vice President Baldoff monthly. Senator Hammond and I met with him monthly and coordinated what he had to say with the research committee and vice versa. So I think we have a good handle on coordination. I point out I am also here the chair of this and also a first-term senator. Right. Something I think that we all are aware of, mental health, and there are a lot of resources going toward it. We met with Dr. Marianne Covey, who's the director of TAMU Counseling and Psychological Services. And as a first instance of cooperation, Dr. Stellian Banerjee also attended this meeting. Just some points that I think are of interest to senators generally. My thing is in the way. Get rid of that. The CAPS is getting more use than ever, at least in Dr. Covey's experience. She pointed out that suicide attempt rates may be rising, but TAMU does not have a department that looks at these data specifically. We don't have specifics on this. Whether we need to or not, we do not. Right. Now, furthermore, there's been changes in resource allocation for counseling services. I believe after moving to student health services, that means more funding for mental health services. And also counseling apps, including the MySSP program and telehealth, have led to a marked increase in students seeking help. It's easier. Some final things. Generally, first-generation students may be struggling more. At least the numbers indicate that or the reporting more. And finally, here, there's two kinds of help that students need. Many, most 4/5, basically could use some life skills training, how to study, those kinds of things. And 20% or so actually have diagnosable clinical issues. And CAPS is being quite proactive in trying to help students get increased, essentially what we call life skills. With respect to student mental health and graduate student health in general, there's a kind of fuzzy writing here, but faculty don't really yet have a good handle for how to help students. And that's the second bullet point. When students on funded grants are struggling due to mental health, it's not always clear what support there is to help faculty deal with the issues that arise. This is an ongoing concern. I do not, or the committee does not have a specific recommendation, but this is an issue. And finally, we have to recognize that graduate students are in a different developmental space than undergraduates. And when graduate students are having issues, they're generally more significant and typically not short-term. The final thing I want to say about mental health is faculty have issues also, and we discovered that many counselors locally are not accepting our insurance plans. They're not accepting insurance plans generally, and they're also less available. So this has created what we call euphemistically a negative impact for faculty seeking counseling services. Again, I don't have a solution, or we don't have a solution, but we should be aware of this. Changing gears entirely. We met with Dr. Trate, who's the director of VPR's Office of Postdoctoral Affairs, about postdoctoral success. And the VPR has established this office to increase generally opportunities for networking and professional development for postdocs. So faculty of postdocs can help make their postdocs aware of this, as well as offering travel awards and creating our research symposium and development workshops. So the VPR's office is being active in trying to make a general kind of groundwork for postdocs. One thing that came up in our discussions, and I think it also applies to graduate students who are NIH funded, is that when you don't get Texas A&M money directly, you can have issues with benefits that are available to those who get paid directly. This is not a TAMU specific problem, but it is still a problem for those at TAMU who might get a prestigious award and discover that their benefits aren't as good as those who are postdocs who are, let's say, simply paid through a standard grant mechanism. Okay. Finally, and I'm going quickly, I realize, let's talk a little bit about the MGT report and possible concerns. And again, this is as of April 2022. We know that there can be unknown consequences, as with anything new, any change, right? We certainly saw impacts on library faculty doing research, and want to put that in the record that we're aware of that. And we don't know the consequences of even having non-tenured, mostly non-tenured library faculty, what that will mean for faculty research generally. Also, as we're well aware, change can mean people get concerned about their jobs. Promotion post-tenure review, we're trying to get a handle on that as a university. And in April, we didn't have as much of a handle on it. And the possibility that this could create retention issues as it might for the library. Those are these first two bullet points. Finally, rapid changes in structures could affect research programs, including impacts on diversity. A couple of months ago, we learned, and I don't know the current status, that we would no longer have a department focused on Hispanic studies. And that has obvious implications for research programs in a state that will soon have a Hispanic majority population. It's a potential consequence of MGT recommendations. And we've heard a lot today about staff concerns and also how the upper level administration is trying to ameliorate issues and keep staff on, which is wonderful. But the fear that staff might leave because they might feel they were redundant. At the time we wrote this, that was a big concern. And centralization, we know, can cause concerns. At the time we wrote this, there were simply issues with hiring research staff from grants and contracts that it was considerably slowed, as well as hiring student workers. Things had slowed down considerably, and these were identifiable concerns. And I apologize if I went a little long, but those are the committee report.
Thank you. That wraps up the committee reports, and we sincerely appreciate all of the time and effort the committees put in this year, working on the charges, and the EC will be preparing new charges for the coming academic year to give committees in September. We have one item left on the agenda, and that is the informational items that deal with continued refinement of the bylaws, including legislative and research committees. So they are there for informational purposes, and Dr. Cecilio will be available to answer questions on those if anyone has them. But we also, they're there now for information. We vote on them next month. So there will be ample opportunity if anybody has concerns. With no other new business, I now invite Speaker-elect Hammond to take us into the Committee of the Whole.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker Rice. I want to begin by asking if there are any positive actions or items of concern that are occurring on campus related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that there are lots of great things, but I think also people are excited to get home soon since it is after 5. Moving on to general items. Is there any business for the Committee of the Whole?
Senator Carpenter?
Yes, while I don't want to belabor the issue, I would like for us to all consider the growing impact of the economic strain and inflation, specifically on our staff, but more particularly our graduate students and postdoctoral students with regards to childcare. In College Station, it costs about $1,000 per month to have one child in reasonable childcare, and our graduate students get about $100 per month as a stipend if they're able to get into the Becky Gates Children's Center. This has become an increasing problem in our efforts to be able to recruit the best and the brightest with regards to graduate students, at least in the HSC, the College of Medicine in particular, and our efforts to be able to retain young postdoctoral graduates in order to be able to build our next generation of faculty. So I would put it forth that the Faculty Senate needs to come forward with ideas. We have some that we're developing in the College of Medicine and College of Veterinary Medicine, but we need better answers than what are there right now. Having someone who makes less than $40,000 a year expected to pay around $12,000 a year for one child in Bryan College Station to receive adequate care is not reasonable. Thank you.
Great opinion. I wholeheartedly agree. Do you see any more, Janice?
Nope, I don't see any more hands.
Great. Okay, well, I now return the meeting to Speaker Rice. Oh, sorry, NK threw his hand up.
Yeah, on the DEI, I just wanted to let you know that we launched a ESS Plus program. In addition to ESS, this is to recruit mid-career and senior level faculty from the underrepresented minority groups. And also we launched a eminent faculty recruitment program, like National Academy members are equivalent in other disciplines. And we have deans have a prospects. Please discreetly check with our office. I'll run it by the system and we'll give a quick response. So.
Fantastic. Okay, I think that's it for everybody. I now return the meeting to Speaker Rice.
Thank you, Speaker-elect Hammond. If there is no other business, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
And I see a number of seconds coming in very quickly. So thank you all. I appreciate everyone's time today in the summer, and everyone take care, and we'll see you next month.
Well.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dale. Sorry for jumping in.
No, thank you for doing that, Tracy. It was because I was a co-host of the meeting, it wouldn't let me in.
I had the same problem, and I've had this problem so many times that I now know how to solve it. You give it like your Gmail account.
So you bypass the, oh, tricky.
Because it did the same thing for me, and it's happened so many times, and I often have to like log out and do this like crazy and join as a guest. But it's just much easier if you just put your like a different account in there, and then it doesn't freak out. But I have had that problem so many times, and I finally figured out the fastest solution there. So
Janine sent me a different link to try and all, and it was just crazy.
Well, now you know the secret of how to get around the weird Zoom blocks, because it doesn't make sense why they would block the host from joining.
I know. It makes no sense at all.
The only way you can do it otherwise is you have to log into your Zoom account and click on the meeting link from your Zoom schedule.
Okay.
Those are the only two things that work. But when you join, even though I put in my Gmail account, it understood because I was logged into Zoom elsewhere that like it automatically gave me host. So, and I tried to like make you co-host, and I couldn't figure out how to do that, and I didn't know if making you host would then remove it. Like the things keep changing. So
yeah. Well, I was stuck, but
now
eventually
you know
I got in. But thank you for leaping in and dealing with it. It could have been 10 or 15 minutes, and on a day like today,
but we had a lot of stuff.
It turned out to be a much longer meeting than I expected, but I'm actually glad we did it, because I think that when they come to the Senate first with these kinds of presentations and all, it not only does it give us a chance to ask questions, but it puts us in the front of the line for being informed about some of these.
I agree.
Aspects.
I thought it was a great solution. So, okay, I should probably run to get the little kiddos, but yeah.
Yep.